It's time now for the award-winning #1 local talk show in Northeast Pennsylvania, The Sam Lesante Show. Now here's your host, Sam Lesante.
Well, folks, 3.3 million children witness domestic violence every year. You know that 3 people die every day from domestic violence, and every 9 seconds, a woman is beaten. So domestic violence is a very important and serious thing that we have to face with in our country today. Well, I'm very happy to have on the show today the District Attorney from Luzerne County, Stephanie Salavantis, and the District Attorney from Schuylkill County, Karen Noon. A little later on, we'll be joined by Apache, who did a movie called Cycle. It was done in 2010, won 2 awards, the best film and the best actor in a film. Great film for you to see. It's only 30 minutes. But let me welcome my guests today, Stephanie and Karen. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
You know, this, as I said, this is domestic violence is something that I think today what we'd like to do, if we could, is sort of educate people as to what it is, some of the signs, and then numbers. Yes, when we talk about what it is and what happens, I think numbers then are staggering, but however, let's try to at least limit our numbers. And as I said, I'm going to air this show on all the systems that we're on. Stephanie, let's start with you in Luzerne County. I mean, just generally as a district attorney, some of the things about domestic violence.
It's one of the hardest areas to actually have to prosecute. We are seeing more and more coming through our system every day, which is sad and it's outrageous. We are dealing with a lot of concerns in our office and with police departments, because when going back to that it is one of the most difficult areas to prosecute, it is hard to actually get the victims most of the time to testify against their loved ones that they believe made a mistake. So it's just an area that I think I have focused a lot on when I came into the office, and I think a lot of people need to focus on this, and we need to stop the abuse that happens every day.
All right. And so with that being said, okay, and the sad part is you see it every day. What are some of the things that have happened in your office, or what is the Luzerne County doing? And I'm sure many counties across the country are doing the same thing, but specifically Luzerne County, what are you doing to help educate or curb or to get the word out about domestic violence?
I am very involved, my office is very involved in, it's called the Domestic Violence Task Force. We sit down once a month and we discuss what can be done better to help fight this epidemic that is occurring every year. And one of the biggest areas, in my opinion, and I believe on behalf of the task force, is training. We need to be able to get out there and train police officers on the best way to approach situations, how to speak to victims of domestic violence, the reporting, which is it is a necessity to make sure that we report and to have reports done every time an officer shows up at a home, at any area that we believe domestic violence is occurring.
Domestic violence, I have here, can be many forms, of course, okay? And talking about physical abuse, they have here, you know, hitting, kicking, biting, restraining, slapping, throwing objects. There's a whole mess of areas that happens. Now, prevention is something that is important. Karen, in Schuylkill County, what do you have as far as, you know, educating domestic violence?
Stephanie is correct when she indicated that it is very difficult for police officers. Many of the police officers that I've been dealing with in the office for a very long time always tell me that domestic violence calls are one of the most difficult to go to, because they go there and you have a person, perhaps a neighbor called it in or somebody else called it in who saw something, and then they're dealing with not only a difficult offender, but it could be a difficult victim as well. So one of the things that we did in Schuylkill County, and I'm sure in Luzerne County they have it in many other counties, is we have a domestic violence protocol that we give to police, we talk about it, we educate them about how to handle these particular types of calls. The other thing that we do, and we're very fortunate to have it in Schuylkill County, is the Schuylkill Women in Crisis, and they're an excellent agency who have been in existence for many years. what they are truly committed to informing victims that this is not something that they have to live with. They have posters, they have pamphlets at a variety of different places all over Schuylkill County, doctor's offices, hospitals, and including pediatrician offices, because obviously many times the victims do have children with the people who are abusing them. So that is the way to get their word out, to get their information out to the public, and saying that as a community, we cannot accept this. We cannot accept domestic violence, because it's just something we can't accept in our community.
Staying with that thought, okay, what are some of the telltale signs, Stephanie, that you can educate our viewers as to what should you be looking for that relates to domestic violence?
I think the biggest area that you should focus on when trying to determine if someone is suffering from domestic violence is what I call isolation. You may have, we'll say, for example, myself, I am very active in my community. I'm very active in my family. I love to be around my family and my friends. But slowly, my friends, my family, the community started seeing me back away. And I'm slowly not being seen as often, and I'm slowly staying at home, and I'm changing. And that's, I would say, that's one of the biggest areas. I'm changing, and not for the better. And so isolating yourself from the population, from the people that you hold dear, is a major sign. Because a lot of the times the people that are being abused, they don't want people to recognize that they have a bruise on their face, or they have bruises throughout their body. They don't want people to approach them and ask them what's wrong, because they truly feel that they love that individual that is abusing them, and they don't want anything bad to happen to them. So I think those are major signs of domestic violence.
And Karen, I know people watching the show are saying, oh boy, I know this happened with just such and such. I know my sister, my cousin. Or what happened to Stephanie? You're right, Stephanie, because if you're a very active person and you've been involved in different things, all of a sudden you don't see Stephanie around, you don't see Karen. What's going on? But here again, there are people out there, they're scared, okay? It's such a difficult situation. And when Apache comes on and he talks about why they did the movie cycle and some of the things that, you know, we're hoping to stop, and that's that cycle. You know, he mentions the word, but we have a war going on, and we do. So Karen, these people that are what Stephanie said, what do you say to them?
Well, I think as an individual, we have the obligation to report these things to police officers, to call my office and report it to Schuylkill Women in Crisis, and then they will get the information to us. I view this very similar to child abuse. No one would ever, if we see something or we know about something, that is our job as being human beings, to report this to the police departments, to report it to our local district attorney's office. And I see the same thing with women who really, they need to have a voice. And that's where Stephanie, she talks about her domestic violence task force, and in Schuylkill County, the Schuylkill Women in Crisis. These are the voice of the women. I understand that it takes a very long time for someone to realize that this is not something how I want to live. And in fact, that's what Schuylkill Women in Crisis do. They have educators, they have counselors that are very, very well trained in helping these women deal with so many different parts of their lives, including economic. And that is a very big thing. I can't leave him because then I won't have anywhere to live. Schuylkill Women in Crisis now have apartments and houses to help you with this transitional living. It is a great agency, and I'm sure your task force has a variety of other things that they're doing. But I just think as human beings and individuals, we have an obligation to report this to our police departments, to the district attorney's office, to Schuylkill Women in Crisis, and get involved.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
I was just going to say, going off of what Karen said, they need to know, I think people need to know that they're not alone, that this is something that there are so many people out there that want to help them. And I'm sure it's the same in Schuylkill County. These centers are, we don't even know where these centers are, for protection of these individuals who are being abused. And they help with the children. They will have areas to care for their children, even their pets, because I know pets are a big concern when people leave their home. Well, what will happen to my animal? Because an animal is part of the family. So they try to do everything to make it as easy as possible for someone who is being abused to come and get the help.
And the problem that people should be concerned about, at least I think so, is the fact that when you are being abused, and if you have children in the home, I know it's a difficult situation. I don't want to do something because there's someone to provide with me, but we have to realize the damage it's doing to their children.
Absolutely.
Folks, I'm talking to District Attorney Stephanie Salavantis and District Attorney Karen Noon. Stephanie's from Luzerne County and Karen is from Schuylkill County. And the phone numbers, I want to put some phone numbers on the screen. I know, folks, it's a very touchy situation, but just think in the long term. How many people we know were being abused at home, never did anything, ended up really severely hurt, ended up in a hospital, or even dead. 3 people every day die from domestic violence. Every 9 seconds, a woman's getting beaten up. Wow, this is some serious stuff. So here's the phone number, 570-622-6220 and 570-825-1674. We come back, we'll talk a little bit more to District Attorneys Salavantis and Noon. And also, we'll be joined a little later on Apache, who made the movie Psycho, won 2 awards, and he'll tell you his involvement and what he has to say about domestic violence. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, folks. Remember, 247ssptv.com. My email, sam@ssptv.com. More than happy to listen to your comments, folks. Remember, thank you so much. Local News 13. Now, folks, as I mentioned to you before, after our surveys came in, over 70,000 people watching our local news Monday through Friday. And thank you so much. The Sam Lesante Show, now over 125,000 people per week. The girls, over 100,000 people per week. We're very happy and proud to give you this information on our news as well as our shows. I say thank you to all of you for supporting us. My guest today, District Attorneys Stephanie Salavantis from Luzerne County and Karen Noon from Schuylkill County, talking about a very serious issue, domestic violence. As I mentioned to you before, Karen and Stephanie, some of the telltale signs of when you know someone's being abused. Because you've had these cases, and you know the best thing is a testimonial from a person who's been abused and waited and didn't do, and then finally they had to do something. It's always sometimes almost too late. So what are some of the signs that you've seen that people should be aware of?
I would say to be aware of the physical appearance of an individual, the way someone dresses. I know an individual, and I've had this experience personally with a friend, that used to wear certain types of clothes, and then slowly it was more sweaters in the summer and scarves around the neck and different things along those lines, accessories that would cover marks on the body. That is, I would say, a good sign that someone is being abused. And like I said before, the isolation.
And how do you approach them, Karen? When you notice a neighbor or a friend, and what Stephanie said, what do you say to them?
Well, I think the first thing you do is you get them away from their abuser. I mean, that's when the police go to a scene in that regard, they talk to them away from the person that's there and say, look, I'm your friend. I want you to be around for a very long time. You know, you have children, you know, and I know, and I'm sure that the same thing is that sometimes people will come forward not because of themselves, but because they really do want to protect their children. And when we tell them, you had mentioned a cycle, and that's the whole thing about this, and we'll hear a little bit more about that before, is that if their children witness this, then they're also going to be doing the violence. So I would tell them, you need to do this not just for yourself. I'd like you to do it for yourself, but also for your children. Come talk to us. We will get you in touch with these counselors from Schuylkill Women in Crisis, from individuals who are very, very, very well trained on how to deal with so many of the complicated issues in domestic violence, and we will help you through the system. Prevention,
I think, is always important. So you have a person being abused, and let's assume the person, when the person has alcohol, abuses the spouse, or drugs, abuses the spouse. Economic abuses the spouse. So maybe there's an opportunity when the person is not on drugs, not on alcohol, and there's an area of time where they can really speak to the spouse and ask for help. Okay, so they know what they're doing to their children. Because after someone does some abuse, and the next day, honey, I really didn't mean to hit you. I'm sorry, I know the kid. I promise you I'll never do it again. Okay, well, you know what happens to a couple of weeks, and you've seen this. So this kind of prevention, what do we have to help both spouses out? So, you know, it could diminish at least. Stephanie?
Well, it goes back to the centers that we keep talking about for Luzerne County. It's the Domestic Violence Service Center. They provide as much as they can to either the spouse or the abused. If we could get it early on and try to speak to the spouse and try to help change the abuse that is occurring, that would be wonderful. My only concern is a lot of the times individuals will come forward and say, I need help, but there are a lot of empty promises. They don't want to lose that individual, so they'll say that, but it continues to go on. So if we can help, the Domestic Violence Service Center will do anything to try to assist. But like I said, a lot of the times they seem to be empty promises, and that's why they're there for the individual that is being abused.
Karen, in Schuylkill County, and the phone numbers, folks, Andy, if you want to put the numbers on the screen again, and I'm sure if you're watching this in any other counties, because we service Berks County, all the different counties, Carbon, they have their own domestic violence, or you can call these numbers and they'll direct you to those areas as well. I'm sure that you could do that. Phone numbers are 570-622-6220 and 570-825-1674. I guess, Karen, here again, it's best. Sometimes confidential calls. For example, the spouse is working. I just got beat up last night. Okay, get on the phone. And have a discussion. Look, I don't know what to do. I need help. You know, please don't tell my husband or my wife I call. I just need some kind of information. Is this available to them?
Yes, I mean, that's the specific number that I gave to you. But these individuals have been trained, because I know that with being in the office for so long, I do believe that arrest can really, whether they like to admit it or not, can help a situation. Because it shows as a community, we're not going to tolerate this. And granted, there are many times that arrests are made and people will say, they're going to go to counseling, this person goes to counseling, and we have had success in that regard. But again, as Stephanie mentioned, there are sometimes empty promises. But again, I do believe that the people have to call. They have to call these numbers. They call our office. They call their local police departments, because there are so many people who really do want to help and cannot tolerate this in a community.
Very quickly, before I bring Apache on. Okay, now, how far do we have to go? Does that friend or relative or the neighbor across the street have to go before they really have to say, hey, enough's enough? I just saw Stephanie. She's beaten up. I know her husband beat her up. I hear them, you know, every day, etc. I just have to make the phone call and report it. When does that occur? Because that's very serious, when the neighbor or a friend has to say, I've had enough. I just have to call.
If you're seeing, if a neighbor is seeing this abuse happening, this abuse may have been happening for a very long time.
Now, not an argument. I'm talking abuse.
Right.
Okay.
So if they are publicly abusing their loved one, that means it possibly has been going on for a long time. And I would I beg people to make that call immediately, because
you could save a life.
Exactly. The next time that individual could be dead. So that is my plea, that people please call if you see any sign.
This is so important, domestic violence, folks. They're very happy to have the both district attorneys here. But Apache came in from New York just to do this show to talk about his film, The Cycle, which was done in 2010. And you'll learn a lot from this and what they're trying to do to prevent this. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, folks, talking about domestic violence. You know, 3.3 million children each year see domestic violence, and there's like 3 deaths every day occurs from domestic violence. 9 seconds a woman is getting beaten. And today we have on the show our district attorneys from Schuylkill County and Luzerne County, Stephanie Salavantis from Luzerne County and Karen Noon from Schuylkill County. Now I'm joined by Apache. Now, Apache's been on the Sam Lesante Show before, talked about his career and etc. But one of the things that you were very much involved with, and you're an upcoming guest on The Girls as well. But Apache, in 2010, you wrote and you starred in a movie called Cycle. Okay,
Yes.
that movie specifically dealt with domestic violence.
Yes, it
Now
did.
there had to be a reason why you got so much involved and won an award for it as well.
Yes.
Okay, why?
In 2010, my cousin and I, we wrote the film. And we were seeing that friends of ours, their girlfriends would get beaten and they would always go back. And we didn't understand that. And they were like, you ladies were talking about before, they're afraid of being alone. They feel that they can't find someone that will be with them, or this guy treats me right, but you have 2 black eyes, but he loves me. He's taking me to the Bahamas. Are you serious? And they would always go back because they always felt that they was alone. And we did some research on it, and we found out that her mother was abused. So she thought that this was appropriate behavior. So it becomes a cycle. And what we did the film for was to bring out, knowledge so people would know that, the cycle can be broken. Because
So in doing the movie, okay, there has to be research done, and of
Yes.
course in which we're talking
Yes.
about this. See, and when we talk about these numbers, they're staggering, okay?
Yeah.
And again, what we're trying to do is awareness, awareness,
Yes.
awareness, prevention, prevention, prevention. Phone numbers we're going to put on the screen, folks, as you're listening to the show, and you can see the show anywhere in the world. So if you have friends who live in California, etc., want to watch the show, I encourage them. If we could save one person from being killed, the show is worth it. So when you did your research, what did you discover?
well, a lot of the stuff that we'll discuss here, every 9 seconds, we've been here for a couple of minutes, about 20 women have been abused and beaten. And 3 women are killed every single day in the U.S.
What do you find the most important thing is? Is it alcohol, drugs, or I mean, what is it that stems, the anger and
It's everything
economic?
across the board. Some guys they don't have any self-esteem, so they beat up on their women because that makes them feel better, And sometimes it's alcohol, sometimes it's stress, so they take it out on the woman that's supposed to be there for them, and the woman that's supposed to love. Your woman's supposed to be there for support. They're not punching bags.
I'm sure Karen and Stephanie, what you've seen, and believe me, your jobs today, anybody who's in law enforcement, I applaud 100%. You can't support them enough because it's a difficult task with drugs and all the stuff that you're dealing with. But sticking with domestic violence, what were some of a story, or if you know of anything, a specific person that you could recall that could be a lesson to us? Is there any specific story that you can tell us, Karen?
One of the things that I had a case, it was many years ago, and I think it really brought to play some of the things that you were mentioning here. This woman actually had to be taken to the preliminary hearing in an ambulance. She was very beaten up, a variety of different bones broken. She came in the ambulance, came into to a wheelchair to the preliminary hearing. She did testify. And then about a week later, she comes into the office and says, I want to drop these charges. And it was just such a, how can you possibly want to drop these charges when this person did these things to you? But you had mentioned that. That's part of the cycle.
Yeah.
And she didn't have a lot of self-esteem. She felt that she wanted to go back to this situation, and there was a lot of work involved to say, we really cannot let you go back to this situation. Yeah. There's a protection from abuse order in effect, that there's criminal charges, there's a court order with bail. Mm-hmm. You cannot have any contact with him. And again, I know that some people don't like to hear it, but sometimes an arrest has to be done.
You did her a favor.
Yeah.
You did her a favor.
You
saved her life.
I'm hoping that we did that.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that
Stephanie?
we did that.
Yeah.
And all the stories are very much the same when it comes to domestic violence. But the one that sticks out, and when I go around and speak to people, I always try to make them listen and think about this situation where this woman, time and time again, she would be so physically abused that she would come in with broken bones, bruises all over her body, a huge hand mark on her neck. And she just continued to go back because of what we're talking about, continued to go back. And it got to the point where she was actually, she was murdered by the person she thought loved her. Yeah. And I want people to remember that the next time you go back, that could be the last time.
And going to your movie, when you did this movie, okay, I'm sure you. What kind of reaction have you received from the movie? And folks, it's Cycle. You could Google it and you could watch it. And I'm sure that the district attorneys at one point in time could play your movie just to educate.
Yeah.
What do you want to get? What do you want people to get from that movie?
Well, I want people to understand that they're not alone. Because in the movie The Cycle, you'll see that I was an abusive husband, but then my son grows up and he ends up murdering his wife. And the cycle gets worse and
Is
worse.
this based on a true
Yeah.
story?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you've seen a lot of that happen.
Yes.
Okay.
And I've seen it from both sides because also women are now using this as a weapon. So that's why police officers don't want to really respond to these calls because they keep going back. And they're like, I'm wasting my time. I could be chasing real criminals. And they go back and women use this as a weapon. Oh, he broke up with me. I'm going to call the cops and say he abused me. They arrest these men. They're in prison. Some of them are not abusers.
What's the most common abuse?
Yeah.
What is the most common thing that you found that people will abuse their spouses? Is it really? I mean, I know everything counts, but
Yeah.
what is the most common thing that you find? Is it alcohol, drugs, economic? What do you think?
Well, in my experience, it's been like economic, the stress. So they come home and they stress. They beat their wives because they're angry that they didn't make enough money. There's not enough money for the bills, and they blame them for that.
And
you know?
correct me if I'm wrong if you think differently, but I think with the economic side of it, the stress, they also do turn to alcohol, drugs.
Yes.
So you see it all combined.
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, Apache, thanks for coming in from New York. I appreciate it just to do this show because I think, again, I'm trying to educate as much as possible. And like I said, the show is on the website, folks, and you may know a friend in Illinois or whatever. Just have them watch the show. Sometimes it's very difficult. I mean, it's a tough to make that phone call because you know. But however, like you said, the children. You've seen. The whole movie cycle is where it's at.
See, our children are affected. This is a war going on. There's a war against women. And we're talking about these are our sisters, our mothers. If I were to go on the street and smack your mother, how would you feel about that? But when you abuse of a woman, that's somebody else's sister, somebody else's daughter, somebody else's mother. And they use the children. The children see that, and it just continues. It continues. That even teenage girls, like we were talking, they're 1 in 5 teenage girls are being abused now. Teenage girls, our daughters, little girls are growing up seeing abuse.
Well, folks, I know we could go on and talk about this, but the whole point is domestic violence. Phone numbers, call 570-622-6220, 570-825-1674. No matter where you are, I could call any one of those numbers and you could say wherever you live and they'll give you information. Apache, thanks for coming on the show. Okay, and we're looking forward to see you on the girls. Yeah. Stephanie, it's so nice that you found the time to come up. Karen Noon, Stephanie Salavantis, District Attorney for Luzerne County, and Karen Noon, District Attorney for Schuylkill County. Folks, if we save one person's life today, the show is well worth it. I'm hoping that you at least become aware of it. You know who you are. You know what's going on. Do something about it. See you next time.